Yeah, that's what the clinical trials are showing, but that's still good enough to be part of the Covax program and be used across the world with the approval of the WHO. So it'll add greatly to the global supply of vaccine, even if it's not the most effective vaccine on the market.
Yeah, it is interesting because, of course, the Covax program is to be, assisting poorer nations. Could China be using that for influence in the way in many countries they've already established quite a presence?
Oh, look, absolutely. And you can see that in the way China's vaccines have been used up to date. China, until recently, was sending more vaccines overseas than it was using on its own population. And so the outbreaks we've been seeing recently have partly been a result of China being enthusiastic in this vaccine diplomacy, because it had been shipping more vaccine abroad than it had been actually applying in its own country.
Yes, and of course the Pacific, our very own area, is a good case in point, which is why Australia has been urged to really drive the vaccination programs throughout the Pacific.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, this kind of diplomacy is, it's very easy to get into a kind of reactive cycle with it. But in this case, I mean, it's the sort of competition I think which is beneficial to the Pacific, because in the case of this vaccine, it's something that can be stored easily in a fridge. It's not like the Pfizer vaccine where it's very complicated. It may not have the greatest efficacy, but if you get enough people using it, it will substantially decrease your death rates in your population.
Yeah. China has been very successful in containing COVID, given, of course, the size of the population, but they're battling a new outbreak in Guangzhou. How critical is this?
Look, it's said to be a much more contagious strain of the virus that they're finding in Guangzhou. And in some ways, what they're experiencing in China is similar to what we've had in Australia, in that because they were so successful in eliminating COVID within their community, the vaccine take-up has been quite low, and they've had to sort of basically had a massive vaccination drive to get their own population to take it. And the kind of hesitancy that you see around taking vaccines isn't just in democracies. You get it in autocracies as well, where people tend to trust the government even less in terms of information than they might in Australia. So Craig Kelly's exist in China as well, and plenty of people have been talked out of getting vaccinated there too.
Yeah. So what steps are they taking at the moment to not only contain this outbreak, but to try and get people to vaccinate?
Look, and this is one of the things where the Chinese political system excels. So it's a party state, and what parties do really well is they campaign. So these sort of short, sharp bursts of activity are what the Communist Party does really, really well. And both of these things, you've seen 100 million people vaccinated in 5 days, which is well and truly a world record. And the sorts of restrictions on movement that you saw in Wuhan are again being applied in Guangdong, with streets being locked down, in large blocks.
Indeed. Xi Jinping has ordered the Politburo to sell a more lovable message of China. Now, how does he hope this image that China is creating for itself globally can be softened?
Look, it's one of those things they've long hoped to tell. They talk about positive energy, and they have Xi Jinping personally loves the way that Hollywood does things, that everything has a happy ending. And they're looking to weave a narrative where, China is seen as warm and fuzzy. And, given what we've experienced in Australia with economic coercion, that might seem far-fetched. But in other places where China is, really a big economic player, in Africa, in Turkey and these other countries, the message sells because China has a successful economic model to sell.
Yeah. And, our country's alert to the sort of soft diplomacy, to the sort of outright propaganda in many ways.
Well, this is one thing I think where journalists need to be a little bit cautious. We've recently had people on our podcast who showed that these sorts of study tours that journalists undertake can actually influence their reporting, because most journalists would think, look, I'm not going to buy that kind of propaganda. I'll go there, I'll get the tours, and I'll come home and I won't change. And these studies show that their behaviour changes. They do a lot less negative reporting on China once they've come back from a free junket. So regardless of whether they're a Western journalist or from Saudi Arabia.
Beware those free junkets. Good to talk, Graeme. Thank you so much.